which involved a lot of land cover land use change PIs working in Latin American countries. It was our day one side event, which was attended, I guess, by 35 people. And there was another session yesterday, which was open to all, which was more technical session with presentations. So this session is going to be more a discussion session, but we have two presentations. So let's see what the speakers are going to say about policy relevance aspects, as well as land cover land use change integration aspects. So the first speaker is, we have Dominic. Dominic, please start.
Thank you. So I'm Dominic Croteau. I work for the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, the CEC. I'm the lead for geospatial information, geospatial and environmental information. So I'm going to present the North American Atlas, a tri-national collaborative process for harmonized transboundary geospatial data. Let's see if that works. Okay. So in a nutshell, the Atlas is about harmonizing data at the North American level. So we work with 3 countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico. And then we try to find data in each country and harmonize it so that we can offer a North American level data sets. And making sure that there's no discrepancies at the borders. So what's the Atlas? Well, first, it's a website, cec.org/atlas. So if you have to remember one thing from my presentation, it's cec.org/atlas. That's where all the information is centralized. So we have a website with information about the different data sets. We have about 55 or so data sets that you can download. We have North American land cover, North American landfills, North American rivers and lakes, North American roads, etc. We also have a map viewer. Oh, you should click on this. So that's an example on the website with the data sets. And we also have a map viewer so that people can have a look at the data before they download it. Some data sets are a bit large, especially the land cover ones. So it's good for people with the restricted bandwidth to have a look at the data set and see if it's good for them or not. So I wanted to show you an example of collaboration, because these data sets are not created in a vacuum. I don't create them personally. And the most popular data set that we have is the North American land cover. So the North American land cover is created through an initiative called the North American Land Change Monitoring System, or NALCMS that we call. And it's a partnership between the 3 countries, between the mapping agencies of the 3 countries. So we work in Canada with Natural Resource Canada, we work in the US with USGS, and in Mexico with 3 agencies, INEGI, CONABIO, and CONAFOR. So with these agencies and experts from these agencies, we meet a couple of times every year, and then we discuss on how to harmonize data that is created at the national level, because every country has their own national land cover program. So we discuss on how best to harmonize the data so that it makes sense at the North American level. It's not simply a matter of taking these 3 land cover program and then putting them together. It's also a discussion so that when you try to harmonize them or stitch them at the border, there's discussion on how best to change the data that is from the national level to the North American level, so that we create this kind of a new data set that is very different, very different at the border from the national data sets. So over the time we created, right now we have 4 data sets, 4 sets of data sets. We have 2005, 2010, 2015, and 2020. And we have the corresponding land cover change. So the most recent one is 2015, 2020. And it takes about 4 years to get the data, because at the national level it takes them maybe 2 or 3 years to get data for a specific year, and the previous year and the year after to get cloud cover minimized, etc. And then it takes a year or 2 for getting all the data and harmonize it at the national, the North American level. So the collaboration process, I wanted to visualize it with a little diagram to show how it works. So basically we have the national land cover from the different mapping agencies. So we get them, we harmonize them at the CEC through the NALCMS initiative by collaborating with these government agencies and by discussing with them. So the data set is not created by us. And then we publish it on our website. And it's important for us to have the data to be open data. So there's no registration, you don't even need to put your email or your name. You just go to the specific landing page of that data set that you want, you click the button, and it's a zip file that you download right away. So it's open for everyone, and then researchers, external researchers are doing their research or their analysis with that data. There's people from different fields, from academia, from NGO, from private sector, and also from government that are using that data. And what I find interesting is that sometimes there's people from the agencies that gives us the land cover at the national level that reuse that North American data sets in their own research. So it's nice to see that we kind of close the loop. I wanted to show an example of some researchers that did a research. I do not know them. I just found it very interesting, especially in the context of Latin America. So we work with the North American countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico. But in this research, they used the North American land cover of 2005, especially the Mexican component, to create a land cover for Latin America. And their ultimate goal is that later on, someone will take that land cover and use our North American land cover and use Mexico as the connecting element so that you can create a land cover of the Americas, which I found very interesting that our data set that has a context for North America could be used elsewhere as well. And the authors of this research were from the governments, from including Mexico, and also from different universities. So you remember this diagram that I've shown you before? Now I want to flip it around and kind of discuss on how to bridge the gap between science and policy making. So we have these researchers that have been publishing their research using our data. But often they don't tell us. We have to do online and do some literature review or Google Scholars and try to find who published data using or mentioning the use of our own data. And that's the only way we have to know it. Because we wanted originally to have open data so that people don't need to register and tell us their name and email, etc. The drawback is that we don't know when they download their data, our data. So we know that the data has been downloaded often, but we don't know by whom and what they do with it. We think that that's kind of a gap that we would need to address, because at the CEC we're connected with different governmental agencies. At the governing level of the CEC, we have, in Canada, we have Environment and Climate Change Canada. In US, we have the US EPA. And in Mexico, you have Semarnat, the Ministry of Natural Resources. So we're connected with them directly, and when we have researchers that use our products, we could tell these government agencies what research has been done with our products. And we're also connected with other governmental agencies, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, NOAA, the WMO, other international organizations. So we're well connected, but what you see here in red is the gap that we have is that people don't tell us when they use our data. So I think that there's a need for data users to inform data providers when they use the data, not just download data and use it and publish it, and hoping that somewhere someone like me finds that publication and then close the loop. So it would be interesting for data user to always tell us, to say, by the way, I've used your data, or by the way, I wanted to use the data, but you don't have X, Y, Z, because I don't know what I don't have. So if people tell me that I'm missing data, then I could try to find a way to create it. And that is it. I hope that you have any questions. So let's start the discussion after the other presentation, I guess.
Let's do questions on this presentation first. Anyone? Yes? Please introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can ask your question. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Emil Fresh. I'm coming from Denmark, and I'm part of a think tank called Concito. And I was wondering if you could perhaps elaborate a little bit on the policies which have been, or the decision making which has been aided by this I come from Europe, and we have a very land-based, for example, agricultural support system where we give agricultural support based on hectares. Is this something that you're discussing, or how otherwise have you been utilizing the mapping?
Thank you. Well, actually, is when the researchers from these governmental agencies are reusing the data when they're closing the loop, they're doing research usually for the agencies for reports that in the end has a couple of bullet points for their ministers about policy, what they should do with that research. So we don't directly do the policy making, but we connect that the researchers, let's say the external researchers, with the governmental researchers and closing that loop.
Yes, Chris Justice. I was wondering, what is your organizational structure that enables the decisions to be made on which data sets you work on? Do you have a steering committee between the 3 countries?
Actually, for the land cover, we have that steering committee, which is the NACMS groups. So it's Natural Resource Canada, experts from Natural Resource Canada, experts from USGS, from the Aero Center in South Dakota, and also in Mexico, people from INEHI, the Statistical and Geographic Agency, and CONABIO for biodiversity and CONAFOR for forestry. For other types of data sets, it depends who created the data sets. If at the national level, the data owner is the government, then we're going to discuss with the governments to see if that data exists also into the other countries, so we can create that North American data set. If it's a researcher that created one data set itself about North America, we're going to contact that researchers directly and ask them if they want us to publish that data set. So for the land cover, we have a steering committee. For other data sets, it really depends on where the data comes from, because we're not data creator per se.
So who decides which data sets you go after?
You mean which data sets should be
That you're
published in
going
the
to
Atlas?
that you're going to include in this collection?
Yeah, we decide with our other colleagues that work on different projects on grassland monitoring, etc. But that's one of the thing that is a gap in our creation process, is that sometimes we don't know what people want if they don't tell us.
Okay. Jill?
So my question is, how many time points you have? I think you said you're interested in change. And what tools do you have to allow the users to visualize the changes?
We have, for the land cover, we have from 2005 till 2020. But 2005 and 2010 was created with MODIS at 250 meter. And then 2010 was replicated with Landsat data at 30 meter, and now we're using only Landsat data. For the land cover process, there's people in the different agencies that are looking at connecting Landsat with Sentinel so that you have higher resolution, but you can also take advantage of the history aspect of the previous documents. I'm sorry, the second part of the question.
What tools do you have to allow users to visualize the changes?
So we create the change for each year and the subsequent one, but we also have the map viewer for people to view it. But we also publish our data sets on ArcGIS Online so that people can view it and also interact with it, so they can see the attribute table behind each pixels. And then you can do some preliminary analysis on ArcGIS Online.
Do you have any use case example of any decision at any of the government agencies across the 3 countries that have used the data to make a decision, and how did they include it into the decision making?
On the top of my head, no, but we did create, since we were trying to find out who is using the Atlas data, we did create a list of more than 1,100 published articles and reports from mostly academia, but also from governments that do environmental impact assessments. So sometimes there's a couple of reports you can find on our website where you see that the authors is, let's say, the USGS itself that use the data and then create a report on, let's say, greenhouse gases emission in North America.
Thank you. Just wondering, so you said that you're working with data from agencies, from one agency from Canada, one from the US, and 3 from Mexico. So I'm wondering why it's the use of INEGI and Conavio and CONAFOR, because they have different products. If you think that it's better to have this redundancy, or it's actually better just to work with one of the agencies, and why the agency decided to work with the 3 Mexican agencies instead of only INEGI, for example?
Yeah, well, actually, the North American Land Change Monitoring System, the group was formed at the North American Land Cover Summit in 2006, and these agencies were there discussing the need of having this collaboration between the different countries. For Mexico, the land cover program is done by Conavio, but CONAFOR is collaborating, especially for the forest land cover classes, and INEGI is kind of the older of all data sets. So they all work together for the land cover.
Any other? If not, I have my own minor clarifications I'm looking for. So can you please explain who is funding this effort? It seems like a consortium and has a lot of people involved in it. And how long? It seems you said it started 10-15 years ago, and it seems good, it's running nicely, it seems. I'm just curious.
Okay, so at the CEC, the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, our budget comes from the 3 countries, Canada, US, and Mexico. It's commingled, so after that, we're considered an intergovernmental organization. So our budget is trinational. And part of the budget goes into projects that have a fixed amount of time with an operational plan. But my initiative is a long-term initiative, so there's no end, hopefully. So every year I get a specific amount of budget to do some, let's say, meeting with the NALCMS so that people can meet and discuss on what's next for the land cover data sets, and also for other activities. But the budget comes from the 3 countries.
Yes. Can you specify from US? Is it USGS or NASA or?
No, actually, the governing body of the CEC is the Council, and is made up of Environment and Climate Change Canada, of US EPA, and of Semarnat in Mexico. But we do work with the other governmental agencies. So for the NALCMS, I work with USGS, even though the budget in US comes from US EPA.
And the second part of my question is users. So do you know how much is your user community? Like, so maybe like you may be having a web counter where people are going into your website and trying to download something. Do you have some estimate of?
We do have the Google Analytics of who's downloading the file on our website. So we know, for example, that the North American land cover is the most popular one. Every year it's downloaded maybe, I don't know, something like 600 or 700 times. I don't know if it's the same person that downloads the same file, but hopefully it's not. And over time, you see the different data set that have been downloaded. Terrestrial ecoregion is the second most popular. I would say that all of them together, or in a year, there's probably something like 3,000 downloads. But I don't know if there's duplicates download, etc. But at least over 1,000 users, I would say.
Because we have a lot of time, so I'm going to ask 2 more minor questions, okay? Do you have any plans to expand to other South American countries? Because US, Canada, I think at least Mexico, it's little, not easy to download, maybe some places, but still US, and there are a lot of sources where we can download, either from USGS or NASA or like even like from Canada. So my question is, especially it will be important and useful for a lot of people if you extend it to all South American countries, this kind of effort. Do you have any such plans? Or?
Well, at the CEC, we work only with Canada, US, and Mexico, but our activities, especially when with Mexico, it covers also Latin America. Like I've shown sometimes what we do in Mexico can be applied elsewhere in Latin America. But if we have data sets that, I don't know, include Mexico and other countries nearby, we could include it, but we have to focus on these 3 countries.
Okay. And this is the last one. So what other data sets, apart from the land cover, that you are planning to integrate? Is it like burnt areas or something? No? Yeah.
What other data sets?
What other additional data sets in near-term future that
we created recently the North American landfills. We have, now that we have over 50 data sets, we look at them to see if some of them need to be updated. We updated the roads network of North America. Sometimes we try to see if there's existing data in, let's say, 2 of the 3 countries, and then we look at the 3rd country if there's a way to create that missing piece so that we could create the North American data set on a specific topic. But like I was saying on my, for bridging the gap, if people would contact me or contact us at the CEC and tell us, you don't have this XYZ data set of North America and it could be useful, then we could start doing some research to see if we can create it.
Thank you, Dominic. With that, I will let you go. It is just like a PhD Viva Voice kind of a thing, everyone asking you so many questions. But very interesting. I think we have another one. So they don't want you to go.
I just have a comment. I also work with Dominic at the CEC. The CEC was created, I think it's an important piece of information, especially today. The CEC was created as part of the NAFTA. It was a NAFTA agreement 30 years ago. As part of the NAFTA, there was a side agreement on environmental cooperation. So 30 years ago, the Secretary was created to help facilitate the cooperation on environmental topics from Canada, Mexico, and the US. 2020, we had the USMCA in the US, TEMEC here in Mexico, and Gutman in Canada. So what we do at the CEC is just work with 3 countries to try to facilitate the work on everything that they align. One of them for a long time has been the Atlas. But we work on many other topics, pollution, we have ecosystem, migratory species. So it's just the agency that helps the cooperation between the 3 countries.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next speaker, next presentation. Oh, yes.
Just taking advantage for one comment too. The thing is that what's cool is to do the work, you're integrating across 3 different countries, right, to try and homogenize data. But at the end of the day, we're not homogenizing across disciplines, right? So what do I mean by that? It's all land cover. So the question was, well, why INEGI, why CONAFROD? Well, INEGI does all the census stuff, right? It's a census bureau, essentially. And the thing is, if you think of all that data, that's potentially extremely useful if you're thinking of land use change, right? Basically all the social factors. Then you have CONABIO, which is basically their prime goal objective is the national biodiversity system. It's got 60, one of the best in the world, 65,000 different species they're registered. And the thing is that that's also incredibly useful, right? Not for basically what we're doing to biodiversity, et cetera, through land use change, et cetera. So the thing is that, my impression from, as a first-time person in this sort of meeting is that we live in an incredibly fragmented data universe that's really where the fragmentation comes from. Hey, first of all, where does the funding come from? Who is the government bureaucracy that's doing this? And then second of all, just scientific disciplines, right? So, I think it'd be nice if somebody tried to say, well, let's take your data and put it with this data, put it with this data, put it with this data, and have these big mega repository that everybody started picking from. Because one of the difficult things is just trying to go across the entire universe, trying to, that might be useful, I didn't know about that, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Very nice, important comment. Okay, anyone else before I invite next speaker? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Gonzalez Abram. I am going to talk to you about a model of an integrated modeling system. Integrated modeling of Mexican sustainable land and food system pathways to support government decisions. So I am part of the Food, Agriculture, Biodiversity, Land Use and Energy Consortium, is FABLE in short, and I'm part of a team, it's a small Mexican consortium of academics in Mexico. FABLE. FABLE is a global network of national research institutions developing their own national scale food and land use strategy. Basically what we try to do is to generate pathways for sustainable land and food systems from the nation, from bottom up. The idea is that they need to be aligned with global goals for example, Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement, so we can figure out from each country what our priorities and how can we contribute to these global goals. I didn't know that I have 15 minutes, so I was preparing for 5. So if you want to know more, please check those sites. We have the FABLE Consortium, Global Consortium site, and then we have the FABLE Mexico. So sustainable food and land use system, what do we think that we can achieve? So FABLE focuses on 3 main pillars, which are equally important: efficient and resilient agricultural systems, conservation and restoration of biodiversity, and food security and healthy diets. These 3 pillars are equally important, and they should be embedded in integrated land use design policies, but also along trade and supply chains consistent with sustainable development. We started working with our own teams in our country because we understand the policy in our country and the culture in our countries. So the idea is that we create pathways to analyze targets and priorities in national policies and strategies. We work about climate, biodiversity, food security, healthy diets, rural livelihoods. And then we build pathways. These pathways are usually a myriad of pathways depending on the country and their needs. The basic one that we always create is the current trends. So basically we see what happened from 2000 until the latest data, and right now is until 2020, and we see how the country is going. And that's what we call current trends. That current trends is what we are going to use to assume what will happen if we do not act differently. Maybe we'll do very well not to act differently, maybe not. So for that, what we do is we create different pathways. In this example, we have national pathways. What would happen if national action and policies are aligned with national commitments? Means if we have a policy and we model its results along another policies, what will be the result? So what we try to do is countries, they have this bunch of policies. Not all of them are fulfilled. Not all of them are used. So what would happen if we really comply with those policies? And then we have another one, in this case is global sustainability. So not only think about what the country needs, but how can we be more ambitious, and we create a bunch of scenarios with assumptions of being that our contribution to global targets is better. Sorry. So with this process, what we do is the FABLE teams, we show these different scenarios to stakeholders with the idea that we start a discussion with them about what are the effects of their policies in each one of the countries, and then we start thinking, what if we do something different? Do you think this is enough for your country? You feel you fulfill or not your objectives? So to do this, each one of the countries have their own team. This is the team Mexico. Right now we are working with academics who have been, some of them have been in the government, so they know how the public policy process goes, but also they are people who have great experience in Mexico and in their land and food systems. So we have ecologists, we have economists, we have geographers, and a bunch of biologists, because I'm a biologist and I have many friends, so what to do? So how do we do this? We use a bunch of models. Because I had very little time, I'm going to explain only one, the one that most of the countries use because it's a very easy tool to use. This is called the FABLE calculator. It's an open access Excel accounting tool. So basically, it helps us study the potential evolution of food and land use systems from 2000 to 2050. It focuses on agriculture as the main driver of land use change, and it can help us test the impact of different policies or scenarios. We work initially with a FAO database, but the idea is that each country can test if that database really represents what is the official data on their country. In Mexico, we have done an analysis, and we are over 99% accuracy. which means that the leftover is basically what happens in different data sets in our country. They don't align, they don't agree. This calculation that is done in the calculator is a 5-time steps, and it computes the level of agricultural activity, land use change, food consumption, trade, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and biodiversity conservation. What these calculators allows us to do is to develop scenarios quickly and use them for stakeholder engagement, basically using assumptions that can be changed really easily with a very quick outcome, and is done transparently because this is an open tool. They can know what are you using, not only the data, but how the calculation is done. What is important for Mexico in this case is that it helps us identify the main imbalances and threats on food and land use systems and the effects of public policy. The effects of public policy is very important because so far in Mexico there is very little analysis of what are the effects across different sectors with different policies. So knowing what are those main imbalances, sometimes created by the same policies that are crashing against each other, is really important. It also allows us to ask questions like, what if? What if we fulfill all our international commitments? You know, what will happen if we fulfill all our own commitments with our own in our own country? So we are talking about public policy. So what is public policy? Basically, it's plans or programs developed by the government to address specific needs. So each one of these areas of the government, they have their own public policy, and most of the time they don't talk to each other. So sometimes they don't agree, but they crash against each other, and they nullify the potential effects to solve any question. So how do we transfer specific public policies in the calculator? Well, ideally, we will need concrete quantitative objectives, very specific expected outcomes, and medium and long-term objectives. But the reality is not like that. The reality is that usually policy comes in the form of, we want to increase maize production. We don't want to import maize. We want to expand the area of sustainable production. They don't tell you what's sustainable production. They don't tell you how much are they expecting to increase the corn. They don't tell you why do they don't want imports of corn or not transgenic. They just tell you this is what we want in general terms. So what is the solution if we don't have what we need? Well, we consult with experts and we adapt to the existing framework, which is basically they are very obscure. With this, our experts in this case usually are the members of the Mexican fable. They are the ones who have the experience and they can translate what is possible. We want to improve the production of corn. What is possible? So we have to run into the policies and see if there is something that is similar to programs that can increase corn production with a very specific results that can tell you what can you do in the country, what can you model. So when we figure out how can we translate this public policy, then we go to the stakeholders. In this case, I'm going to present what happened with the Ministry of Agriculture. The main interest of the Ministry of Agriculture was to use quantitative tools to analyze trade-offs and current and future public policy related to agriculture and rural development. And they wanted to collaborate with academic institutions because there is a lack of information. They don't have time because they have their jobs, so they don't have time to be current in the literature. They don't really know what are the advances that they can be used in their own policy and in their own programs. So they also wanted a collaboration with academics. What we decided is that we were going to work with the General Directorate of Public Policies, Foresight or Forecasting, and Climate Change. What they wanted is to be able to use a calculator, and the calculator was actually generated so public servants can use it anywhere. And we decided in the use of Excel precisely because everyone in the world has Excel. So they wanted to use the Fable calculator, so we started a process of training, which is not very easy when you don't have people in these positions who are not modelers. Then they realized that they needed to Mexicanizar the calculator, to tropicalize the calculator. So basically, their bosses, they really wanted the data that they think is the official data for Mexico. Casually, the official data for Mexico is the one that they generate, not INEGI, which is the institution of geography and statistics. So we had to check what were the records and then check against our calculator. Fortunately, we were very close, so they didn't bother with that anymore. Then they wanted to create their own scenarios. They wanted to adapt the scenarios that we have so they would represent the scenarios that they by mandate, needed to implement. So what we did was precisely that. We selected a series of public policies so we could represent them in the calculator. And then what they wanted is comparison. What they have as public policies, compare the results, not only in the short term, because Mexico has 6 years of a federal government, so they always want to know what is going to happen in year 6. But they also wanted to know what would happen if these public policies that were implemented now were still implemented further in the next government, like until 2030, until 2050. So that was something that it was from the start really good, because they started to see that there was something good about thinking in the future instead in very short terms, start thinking in the medium and long terms. And then they wanted to escalate the calculator at some national level, because of course there is national policy that is implemented in territory at the state level, and what happens from the national policies once that they get to territory is completely different. So they wanted to see how it looks like in different states. So we started to work with that. They also wanted to know many other things, like for example, what would happen if we change different land races of corn in different parts of the country. Again, the problem with that is that they didn't know exactly what that meant. They didn't have a very concrete objective. They didn't have any expected results. What they wanted is just to fulfill one of the questions that came from above. How can we keep using our own corn and not import corn? So what we did is to select some of the scenarios to change. These are scenarios that in one way or another are related to the Ministry of Environment. So first, they didn't want any diet change. They wanted to work with the current diet in the country. The current diet in the country is not something that someone invented, but is something that is identified by a series of surveys across the country. And it tells us what is the people eating. So we can know their preferences, and we can know how what people is eating is generating disease related to food consumption. But they didn't want to change that, so that was very clear from the beginning. So no diet change in the calculator. They wanted sustainable corn production, but they didn't know what that meant, what were the expected yields, and in what area was presented. So what we did is to look in the past, what had been done. And we found a fantastic program of non-conventional agricultural practices run by CIMMYT, which is the Center for Research and Modification of Maize and Wheat, something like that. And the program is called Masagro. And it runs along entire Mexico for 10 years now, and they have been testing what practices work for each particular producer. And with this, we identified that we could increase we could increase the yield of corn in rain-fed areas up to 4 tons per hectare, which is 3 tons more than what happens usually in Mexico in average. Then they also wanted to freeze the agricultural frontier, because Mexico has a very large agricultural frontier and it cannot expand anymore, because wherever you expand, there is either a very high slope or there is no fertility. So it's very easy to say we don't want to expand it anymore. So we decided that we were going to work with the 2016 area that existed, and it came for another national plan, agricultural national planning, in a previous administration. Then they wanted to work with agroecology. That's a little bit trickier because they don't have numbers. They don't know what are the practices beyond organic agriculture. So we have to come up with the experts and ask them what is happening in the fields, what is people doing. So many of the people, many of the producers are using at least one of the agricultural practices that are called not conventional. So we put that it was 75% of the area that also was similar to the number that it was reported in the National Program of Development. With reforestation, it was the same. We use another program called Sembrando Vida, and we use other similar programs to pump up the amount of area that it could be reforested. This is possibly done. This has been analyzed by our experts, and they say, yes, it's difficult, but it has been done, and it's possible by 2050. Not in 6 years, but yes, by 2050. Reduction of food waste. They were very interested in knowing what happened with food waste because it means less area for agriculture, but that was difficult. The only thing that we have is a trinational agreement with Canada and the US that says by 2030, 30%, there should be a 30% reduction in food waste by 2030 in each one of those countries. So we included that to see what happened. And finally, imports reduction. We don't want import of corn. We want to reduce to less than 40% of the import of any corn at all, beans by 9%, and rice by 14% too. And with that, we created, there's a lot of wording here, don't pay attention. Basically what I want you to see is there are different scenarios in that first column, and then in the middle is what we call a trajectory. It's a bunch of scenarios together that are all related to land and food systems. This one, the one in the middle, is the one that SADER created. And the one that is in this way is the comparison with a bunch of scenarios, some of them from public policy that exists, and some of them who are created by the experts based on what it could happen in Mexico, like really thinking, what are we able to do? And then we have the solutions. We had our results to show SADER what happened. So basically, the first two graphs in the top, it shows you that you, as a country, are able to produce enough kilocalories for the diet, the current diet in my left. So if we keep eating like we're eating in a population, we still can feed the entire population in Mexico. If we want to change the diets, because this public policy also included in the case of the pathways that we created with the experts, it included changing diets towards a more balanced diet. Then you will have also the ability to produce enough kilocalories, just right there. Like you are able to fulfill the population needs, but there is not much, you don't have much space to move. So what will happen with the land cover change? If we apply all the scenarios from SADER, from the Ministry of Agriculture, there is very little change in the land use. We see basically that the trajectories are the same. There is no much change. But if we apply the sustainable pathway, what we see is that the diet is really changing what people is eating. And because we apply modern silvopastoral production only to 5% of the cattle produced in the country, it will mean an increase in production. And with that, you have a reduction in the area that is used for pasture. And that means that there is a recovery for natural areas, a regeneration of vegetation in areas that are not being used. So, similar, when we think about the share of terrestrial land which can support biodiversity conservation, is the same. If you have the policies, the applied policies for SADER, what you see is that you don't reach what we would like by an international desire, which is 50% of the area. But if you apply the other scenarios, then you can reach up to 65% of the area where it can support biodiversity. The GHG greenhouse emissions, it happens basically the same. If you reduce your consumption and you of red meat, but you increase the production also, so everyone has enough red meat for their physiological needs, what you have is a regeneration of natural areas and a reduction of the emissions created by land use change and also by cows, methane. So what we do is we went to SADER and we showed them this. Well, they actually helped us to do it. They run the scenarios also. So what we did is, okay, Mexico has the capacity to feed its population, right? Availability is a different issue, but we have the capacity of production. So that's good. It doesn't matter what diet do you have. It might be more healthy than another one. It might be more difficult to change to a more balanced diet, but we can, in both cases, produce enough. Of course, the model is very sensitive to diet change in Mexico. That doesn't happen in every country in the FABLE teams. Mexico produces most of the food that they consume. That means that any change in the diet is going to be reflected directly on the land. That doesn't happen in Argentina. Argentina has a lot of land that is used to export grain and export soy. What they eat in the country is not as important as how much China or Russia is needing from their grains. Maybe not Russia. Imports, we use imports in the sustainable scenarios, in the sustainable pathway, to reduce pressure on not efficient systems. So what we did is, Mexicans like corn, we like to eat our own corn, so we are going to produce our own corn with very little increase in yield. But we are going to import most of the corn for cows. Who is very good producing corn for cows? Argentina and the US. So there you go. We import that. But also we are very bad at producing milk. It's very expensive economically, but also environmentally. So if we put imports, we increase the imports in milk and feed corn, then we improve what happens in our land. Then modern silvopastoral production really reduces agricultural frontier and the GHG emission, due basically by land use change and livestock production. We found out with an analysis that I cannot show you right now because I didn't know I have that much time, that the best combination is diet change, silvopastoral systems, and imports. What is missing that is also able, this model, to tell us is what is the data that we need. There is a lot of focus right now on production of agroecological practices, sustainable practices, whatever you want to call it. And what we found out is that we don't have enough information to model what will happen if we included those practices, what will happen to the land, and if we will have enough food, production of food. So these are the conclusions, and if you're interested in one of the exercises, this is the paper that we produced in 2022, and you can find it in fablemexico.org.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes.
So I have a question about how you create the recent trend scenario. Because for any data set, I could imagine a variety of ways to characterize the recent trends and extrapolate them. And especially if, how does the calculator deal with when the recent patterns have not been stable? And so, you know, some people call it a business as usual, but what if business has not been usual? And then what are you extrapolating if you know, deforestation has spiked one year and dropped the next year? What does the calculator do?
So the calculator uses historical data, and I didn't show it in here, but basically it starts with population and the needs of diets, the needs of food based on the current diets, basically what we know that the people eat, consume. And with that, what it does is it calculates how much land is needed for the crops and for the area for the cows, the other way around. The area for livestock, and then the area that is needed to produce enough food for the livestock. Then it calculates how much is area is needed for human consumption, all the crops. And then from that, what it does is calculates, once that it calculated the area, then we see how much area do we have, And if we don't have enough area, the model goes back, and then we adjust, or we basically say there is not enough area. We have to do something else, and we start working with past trends in imports. And we say, okay, you continue with those imports and with those exports. So it balances itself in a way based on historical trends. How do we go into the future? We put a couple of scenarios for climate change, for example, that it will tell us more or less how the productive system is going to behave, and it adjusts in the area and in the productivity. And with that, again, you go back and see if you need to change something else. Does that make sense? If not, we have the technical expert over there, and maybe I missed something and he can tell us. Oh, yes, over there.
I can, other people can ask questions.
Other people can ask questions. Who are those other people?
Thank you. Very interesting talk. I'm wondering about, so you mentioned that you did this in collaboration with SADR for Mexico, for the country, but that there is also like regional initiatives that will be made or that are going on, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the teams that are part of the consortium, the FABLE consortium, they come from different institutions. And what they do is they also diverge in some other projects. Some of them are close enough to FABLE that we can include some of the calculator to create new modules or new areas or new countries. In this case, there is a project that is interested in creating subnational calculators to identify public policy in those states. So right now it's going to be by 2025, we are going to have 9 states, mostly from Jalisco and all the way to the Pacific until Veracruz, I think so. So yes, the idea is to have that and to try to identify how different public policies affect each one of the states and how together as a country, how does it look, how does the land and food systems look once that you have applied those policies at the state level.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris.
Really nice study, fabulous study. But I was wondering about incentives for the community, for population, for people to shift their diet, and how is that factored into your thinking? Because you can make recommendations, but then getting people to change behavior is a whole nother thing, and it's very tricky.
Very tricky. It's one of the more tricky things to do. You can change many things, but diet sticks with it. There are different ways. There are public policies. I didn't show them here, but Mexico is pioneer in different public policies trying to push a dietary change. It is not working, not yet. It takes time. Some studies have shown that it takes decades before there's really a change. What we factor in here is an adoption timing. Basically, we have, don't know how to call it. We have adoption timing. So what we say is that a change in diet, it will change 10% in 20 years or in 5 years until the completion of the diet change, that it might be in 70 years. And that's what we model. So what we model is not a dietary change in 5 years. What we model is a dietary change that it might happen in 2050. We have an expert who works precisely on that, not only in identifying the diets in Mexico. She works at the Institute of Public Health, National Public Health Institute, and what she does is she designs the surveys, she analyzes the surveys, and then they work with the experts to create a better diet for the Mexican needs that is culturally adapted and is physiological adapted. But they also know how difficult it is to change. So they have pushed public policy in different areas. They are increasing the tax in sugar. They are there is a public policy where schools are not allowed to have high calorie and high in salt, high fat and high everything. All the good is gone from the schools' lunches. So that and several other practices. With that, we are expecting that somewhere in the future, to 2050, we are going to be able to change those patterns. There is also a lot of push to have regional diets, so it's more easy, and that's been done. These diets, like preference of diets, are being done by region. It's not by the state, but by region, like the northwest of Mexico. They eat very differently than what you're eating right now in Oaxaca. So there are different regions, and they are pushing so that each state health sector pushes towards a diet that is more culturally adapted to the needs of that region. So there is a lot of policy. Not all of them can be implemented in the model, but many of that policy is implemented in one way or another. For example, in the change of diet, how long it will take to fulfill that diet. So we are hoping to capture more of those dynamics once that we have the subnational calculators.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I have.
Hi, let me ask you a personal question. Who pays you? I mean, who funds this Fable initiative?
My husband. That's why I have a sugar daddy. No, different ways. There is the secretariat. They had initial funding in 2018 from several foundations, most of them based in Europe. Right now we are working with several IKI projects. Do you know IKI Foundation? So IKI projects are funding part of the work, and we are hoping that the FAO is going to fund part of the work that is going to be done in Mexico. And when we don't have funding, my husband.
Okay, I have some additional minor questions. So I guess this is still aspatial, yeah? It's not spatial, because it seems you're integrating FAO stat data. But when you said like you want to go deep into regional level, it's not going to be easy to get all the data for each counties or provinces kind of a thing, yeah?
We are very lucky that we have a fantastic wealth of data in Mexico. You wouldn't believe it. There is many missing things, but the National Institute for Statistics and Geography, they do surveys and census nationwide with the same exact methodology. So we have data since 2000 at the state level, and since 2003 at municipal level on production, on area that is irrigated, on many things. So it's not that difficult to download, to downscale, so that would be good. There is some things missing, but it's going to be very easy. But for specialization, we are working on it. We have Federico over there, who is in charge of doing that, and we're hoping to maybe work with Dominique for the Mexican case.
So anyone can download this tool, yeah, from your website? Is there, no, anyone can download the
Yes, it's an open access.
Source.
We have in the fablemexico.org, we have a version of the calculator that was used to generate the results and analysis for this paper. So this one is there. It doesn't have the latest updates, which are many, including the agroecological module, but a version that is much more updated is going to be available in a month or two.
Year independently from the previous ones. I mean, the previous 5-year step is going to be like the baseline for the next one and for the next one. And since it's a construction and not a projection per se, we haven't not paid that much attention to variability. But for example, we have discussed using a 3-year average or 5-year average for the historical data instead of these years ending in 0 and in 5, and see what happens. That's something that we need to do. And also regarding specialization, we are trying different ways to make spatially explicit these scenarios, but ex post, converting the outcomes of the calculator into maps, not calculating in every pixel. and there have been attempts in some of the countries to do so. Attempts and results.
And in validation, Mexico has done an exercise for this paper to validate. In this case, when we published this paper, the data that we have, it was until 2015. The model runs with historical data until 2010, and then the first step, it will be 2015. And we used that one with the official data for production, for example, to validate what we were doing. And we were pretty close.
So it seems to me, in statistical sense, this seems like a more multivariate problem. So related to that, do you do any sensitivity analysis to explain the variance aspect of any specific, if you have like 30, 40 variables, if people want to know what is causing the most of the variance, so do you do any sensitivity analysis of those variables?
2 countries did that. One is in this paper, we did one in Mexico, and Australia also did one.
I don't remember which one the variables were. One is definitely diets. I want to argue what I am from Argentina, and what Charlotte said about Argentina, but we thought that diet was not that important, but our recent results show that would be even more efficient to change diet than any other policy we can imagine for afforestation or anything for us, for Argentina, because less less meat is less number of cows, less number of hectares of pastures and forage crops. So this is simple math. It's less emissions.
In the case of Mexico, we also found that population was very important, the most important variable, and then diet. Diet really transforms everything in Mexico.
Thank you. It seems like you want to keep it simple, because like we are seeing a lot of literature on deep learning techniques for forecasting and simulation and all sorts of stuff, yeah, which is nice, so that like you have more control maybe rather than like a black box kind of an approach. Yeah, good. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's a detailed, thorough presentation. We all enjoyed. I am going to definitely test your calculator, maybe for India, where I originally from.
We have an Indian team.
Oh, nice. So
yes, and they have several papers.
Excellent.
He's here. Ranjan, are you here?
I am no.
Oh.
Okay, in this meeting. Very nice. So yeah, if there is a chance, I will like to interact with him. Okay, so thank you so much again. So please don't go. We have a couple of questions. Maybe like I will keep it short, maybe 10 or 15 minutes max. Can you please open that presentation, please? Discussion questions. Yeah. So if you see our session, I mean the title as well as like the content there, these are the questions that we ask. So I'm not going to read all those questions. You can see each of those questions. So let us take few minutes to answer those questions if you are, if you can, and or if you have any experience. So little bit of background. We are from the Land Cover Land Use Change Program. You can see like there are 2 important people sitting at the back. We are from NASA, Land Cover Land Use Change Program. Dr. Garik Gutman, he is the program manager. I'm the deputy program manager for the NASA Land Cover Land Use Change Program, and Professor Chris Justice is a program scientist for our program. So in NASA headquarters, we have 2 important portfolios. One is research, and another is applications or earth action. So what our higher ups are suggesting is we need much more collaboration from both, research side and the applications and earth action side to come up, join hands to come up with some good solicitations which not only address just research or just applications, but both. So that was the background, and then like from our program we fund every year, let's say like 12 to 15 different proposals. I think here we have like a couple of PIs sitting, Dr. Pontius here and Dr. Volker Radulov here, and some others maybe. Yes, sorry, Robert, yes, Robert there. So yes, Nick there, I see him at the back. Couple of others who were there previously, but they might have left. So anyway, so please pay attention to those questions, and let us take maybe 5 or less minutes for each of them, and then we'll be done. So you can see the first question: how can researchers effectively communicate findings to policymakers and practitioners to inform decision making? I think the previous tool, I was really impressed. I think that is one of the method. I think the tool provides some quantitative measures, I guess, to at least reach out to the policymakers and show at least some data, and then like if we do this or like come up with some good solutions, I think they might be showing or impressed, little bit easy to impress them, I guess. Yes. So I want to share additional ideas if you have any, apart from such tools, what else we can do to address that question. Anyone? Yes, Volker.
Thank you. For the first two questions, maybe, I think, Charlotte, your talk was great in that you analyzed existing policies. And I think we need to start with what the policymakers are thinking about. And so often in academia, we like to design the optimal policy, the conservation plan for the world, or something like that. That's not what the policymakers are discussing, and then it's very hard to come afterwards and say, hey, would you please listen to me? So I think the point is analyze existing policies or policies that are being considered, and then seeing what their effect may be.
So please don't think that I'm not writing anything. The voice recorder is on, so that it is recording your suggestions and comments. So it is for me to digest and synthesize and come up with the notes. There will be no names involved in the synthesis report. Okay.
I was going to say that we're very naive about the way we talk about decision makers and policy makers. It's not a monolith. They are a wide variety of decisions and policies that are being addressed. It seems to me that the first step is to understand what information is needed at this time, and if there's an opportunity, what information would be needed in the foreseeable future. And then to have a co-development of what that actually means in terms of the information that you're hoping that you can provide. Everybody wants their research to be relevant and to benefit society. But I think to try to get that policymaker, decision maker interaction takes a long time, and it needs to be co-developed. Unless you're really lucky with some example of evidence-based policy intervention from a research paper, which is probably not very often. And so developing a program where you've got an understanding of what is needed and what information is actually going to move the needle. But you also have to recognize that those policymakers and protectionists are changing over time, and you start a good relationship with a manager, and then they get promoted or they leave. The next person coming in has no interest. So you've really got to be agile in what you're doing and look at it almost like at an institutional level for information rather than an individual decision maker or policy maker, because they're very transient. Yes. An answer to that question.
Yes, please.
Exactly. A month and a half ago, the Mexican government changed, and they changed everyone up to one level. So we ended up with the people that we were training, which are very dedicated, and they are part of the ones who not modify, but adapt the public policy to be landed in territory. But that's it. Everyone in the top was lost. The Mexican team, what we do is we use our networks. So the initial contact with SADER was through our personal networks, because we are a bunch of scientists, and in the past 20 years, scientists have been able to reach these positions of policymakers or policy advisors. Then we use people like Salvador, or other people who have been our teachers, our colleagues, or Coco, for example, here, which is a colleague of mine from, when I studied biology. So what we do is that we go back. It's very expensive and it's very difficult, because then you have to have money to start all over again. Where we are hoping is that because we have a level of technicians working with the calculator, they are able to instill in the new bosses how important this is, but we don't leave it like that. We are trying to do it from different areas, from the international area for people that know the new Ministry of Agriculture. He was in FAO, we have contact with FAO, maybe we will ask to be over there. So we try to reach everywhere. But that's a Mexican case. Not all the cases here are like that. In Europe, apparently, you go and knock on the door, and then they receive you, and then they talk to you. I don't know. That's what they have told us. So I think that each country represents their own challenge. And the good thing is that in the case of Mexico, we have a lot of friends who have been able to knock the doors and introduce us to the right people. But despite that, we only had success with the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah, so this is He Yin from Kansas State University. So I want to flip the coin a little bit. So here's like we got results. We want to deliver our messages to different stakeholders, different institutions for decision making, right? But sometimes it can happen the other way around, that the institutions or the decision makers have something specific in their mind, and they reach out to you and ask you to produce something, for them. That is really specific, especially during the crisis. That's armed conflicts. I got a request by all sorts of governmental agencies or governments, whatever, in terms like, oh yeah, can you monitor race, during the war, to report, we need this for decision making, for post-conflict reconstruction, recovery, all sorts of things. But then I don't have a capacity. It's really challenging. So this is mainly my question. I don't have an answer to this, but mainly, to add more questions into the discussion table. But like how we could, as a researcher, to fulfill the need of different agencies, their request, but also, to be able to produce that, especially like in terms of the crisis, like armed conflicts, in a timely fashion. Sorry for adding more discussion points.
I think that one of the things that happens with these type of tools is that they are simple. The idea is not that I will be working for the Ministry of Agriculture. The idea is that they adopt the calculator and they are able to run their own projections, their own scenarios. And in time of crisis, they will have their own people in a very simple tool. And it won't give you a sophisticated answer that covers everything, but it will give you a direction. So you have another tool to make decisions. And when you have a crisis, then it's easier, right? So I think that these types of simplified tools are important. And right now in the room is not the people who are trying to make it even more easy. So they are trying to make a web interface with the scenarios that they have created within the same ministry. But so the bosses can go and click in here, in here, in here, in here, and say, oh, this combination of policies are crashing against each other. Why don't we change this? From within the institution. So the idea is that we give these tools to the institutions so they can make their own use of it in a more effective and simple way.
Thank you. Any other ideas? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Maria Diaz. I'm Senior Manager of the FABLE Consortium, so I work closely with Charlotte. No, I just wanted to say that we have teams in 24 countries, and Mexico has been, let's say, like our star example on the stakeholder engagement. I think the key here was that they didn't produce their scenarios and then they went to the ministry and said, here is our results, and you should, by the way, reduce your meat consumption. I think the key of success here was that they worked with them since like in the beginning. Like, let's build this together. What do you need, and how this tool can support you? We never try to produce numbers to say like this is the answer to your problems. The idea of this tool is to show like an integrated image of like a photograph. That not only looks at your sector and your priorities, but also the implications that this will have in others. And what we're trying to do is to use the tool more as a tool to enable discussions across sectors. Usually Ministry of Health, especially those who are designing dietary guidelines, are not necessarily speaking with the Ministry of Environment. So they are maybe promoting more meat consumption, for example, and the Ministry of Environment is actually trying to reduce deforestation driven by livestock. And then you have the Ministry of Trade, who is actually, its goal is to increase exports of beef. Again, example. But just to say, the idea of this tool is to really facilitate this discussion, show synergies, show trade-offs, and then, prioritize in a coherent and consistent way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is incredibly progressive. I really enjoyed the conversation.
But one of the issues that we've got, at least from my side, when we're trying to work with government agencies, is whether the agency has the technical capacity to really use the tool. Second is, how does it fit with their existing structure of analysis, or is it an additional burden then that they have to take on? And then, who's going to pay for that once it's been developed, and is there commitment, institutional commitment, to maintain it and then keep a relationship with the researchers to refine it and improve it and keep working on it? Because the people that are really responsible probably don't have time to do the back-end development and enhancement, but there needs to be that relationship where either an agency, organization, or a university provides that service, and on a needs basis, right? It has to be driven by demand. And then I think then you've got the opportunity to make this, it sounds really, really interesting.
Thank you, Chris. Robert, yes?
So building on that, just two kind of thoughts of some of the challenges from the researcher side of doing that kind of engagement, which I think is fantastic, and like this presentation is just mind-blowing of how much you all have put into that policy engagement. But you know, in like a typical grant funding, like a NASA grant or an NSF grant, that co-development process, right? Like I'm trying to do a randomized controlled trial with Conservation International. It's like 2 years of engagement of really understanding the questions they want to do. We've worked in Paraguay on a NASA project, and there, luckily, like we were able to identify partners quite quickly, and that was what we were able to put in for a proposal and have continued to collaborate with the agency. But usually that's kind of unfunded, like relationship building and engagement and figuring out those questions, and once you have the question, then you can actually apply for funding. And I think that's just a mechanistic like barrier to making this work. And I think on the opposite side, there's a similar problem of, you know, once we have our results, often like I have a lot of work in Chile, and we just had a workshop with a lot of senior policymakers. That was fantastic, but it was analysis of policies that are in the past, they're relevant right in the moment. The grants that funded the research are long gone. This was just like flexible funding that I had to like come up with myself to fund a workshop for 3 days, right? And that's a real challenge of who is out there to fund that type of policy engagement workshop. We approached several foundations, tried to find somebody, but it's not a typical funding structure, I think, for that. You know, whenever the question is topical again, to bring back the research insights that you have to guide policy making.
Thank you, Robert. I think we are covering not in a particular order, but the barriers part, I think that's what you addressed. So again, there is no specific order. I think we are discussing as a whole. Thank you for that, because like you are, the co-development part, as Chris and you mentioned, that's the first part, and the barriers that you just mentioned is another part. We have a couple of hands raised. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Georgina O'Farrell, and I'm with the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. Just definitely kind of touching a little bit on those 4 questions, knowing that we're a little bit kind of on the other side of, you know, most of the people here, how those researchers effectively communicate to policymakers and practitioners. The CEC has been there for 30 years. We have those connections with the government agencies at a federal level, and we work, as Dominic was presenting, kind of with many different agencies over the 30 years. We have those connections. We don't do policy per se, but all the work that we do at the CEC certainly influences national policy making, because we work with technical experts. All the work that we do, we work with government experts, and in many cases with researchers. But we need to know from researchers what is needed from us. We have the funding, we have the capacity that 30 years government have changed, and we continue to influence the environmental agenda. So it's about that communication one way or the other. There's so many projects on the monarch butterfly, pollinators, where we directly work with researchers, with the scientific committees, and they are the ones that tell us where, you know, we should be investing the funding, what kind of projects are needed to maybe influence one way or another that decision-making process, and to work with the practitioners on the ground. So I do think that it's kind of both ends true, you know, it's about kind of researchers kind of, you know, doing research, but also reaching out to those that have the funding and the capacity to keep working when we have changes in government and in agencies.
Yeah, I know. We cannot get funding. I've been since 2018 looking for funding to do this work, and it always comes from international sources that can chip in a little bit. It's a ton of work to do the technical part and the work with the stakeholders. In the team, we are fortunate because we are a big team, because we are a consortium. There is people who is specifically in the technical part. They don't work that much with the stakeholder engagement. So when I don't know how to do it, like for example, I ask my friend, and Clara is here. She is the one who works with the calculator. If I don't know what to do, I just send it to her and she will fix it. So I can focus on other things. So I don't know everything about it. So we diversify what we need, our knowledge. So it's easier in that way. But we are a big team. We are 24 countries. There is US, there is Canada, there is China, is Australia just left us because they didn't have funding. Exactly the same reasons. We are trying to bring Chile, Guatemala is coming in. So there is a lot of people, and because we are all, not academics, but in research institutions, most of us, we all know something. So it's very nice. So I suggest you join us.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to speak something that, I don't know, a lot of comments prompted me to realize. And it's going to urge maybe blurring of our definitions, and it's going to make reference to what Ruth and Chris both mentioned this morning. So as part of my project, I made connections with communities in Guatemala. Initially, this was kind of to enable validation of satellite products, collect field data, and it involved some capacity building. So some of the data I collected with drones, I got the images, and then we have a few more batteries, so we teach people how to use it. During the course of the project, something happened in Guatemala is they had a change of administration, a new president, and the president was able to assume the office in part, and no small part, because of the efforts of indigenous community members throughout the country. So where at the start of my project, that community was disadvantaged, persecuted, at present they've had the president visit community. They have the direct line to the Minister of Agriculture. And so I'm thinking that by virtue of providing basic kind of small area extraction of some of the data that we processed, by building up community capacity, it's enabling them to justify and articulate how agricultural policies and development policies more broadly related to water resources can benefit their communities, and to make those requests to an administration that's sympathetic. So in this case, I'm perceiving of some of my own activities as indirectly enabling decision-making at that level. And when I mentioned before about making reference to what Chris and Ruth said, we got a very low grade for our communication, our self-advocacy. But I think Chris mentioned that we really do have good practices for working in landscapes with partners, with communities. And just as it happened, some good at that level came about indirectly, I think, through what we did. And whereas going forward, it's very easy for me to just pull from data products we have, because even capacity building is, it's limited in certain areas more than others. Maybe it's just as easy for me to try to articulate the benefit of this, to try to demonstrate the potential.
So I think you've just answered number 3, right? You've got an example that you were able to...
The interventions haven't occurred yet. it's been pretty recent that they have.
But it's on track.
Yeah. So it's it's follow-up reporting, I guess.
I was
to
going to
formalize it.
I was going to say something for Krishna's phone, if he's still recording, that we want to come out of this session. What do we want the message, right? There's some really good stuff going on. That's the first message, and we've heard about it. The funding structures and the ability to support this is way below what it needs to be. And if people are really serious about actionable science and policy relevant research and implementation, then we need a very different way of funding this activity. It's not a 3-year research project. It's 3 years to engage, let alone. So you need a long-term trusted relationship, and you need to make sure that there's a pathway to this operational implementation that has ownership by the people that are going to be, we call some of them stakeholders, but these are the people that are really going to use this in a sustained way. So I think we need a very different funding structure from what we've had, and everybody is trying to find $5,000 to do something that's really critical, and that's not where we should be. The importance of land use stuff is so high, and the structure to enable that to happen is so low. So that's one of the messages coming out.
Thank you, Chris. I think those are all very important comments, and thank you for summarizing. We ran out of time now. It's already 6:15. So unless you have any burning comments, maybe 2 or 3, Nick, keep it short so that we can record.
Very quickly, maybe to the NASA folks. So I've seen the Earth Action programs getting kind of put out, scaled up, and those, a lot of them resemble the typical timeline anyway, but they seem to prioritize different dimensions, some of which might be relevant to that. Do you see that being any kind of a solution, or do you think it needs to be a different format, different structure, like you just said?
I would say they're struggling to figure out what needs to be done. They recognize that you can't have a 3-year Earth Action initiative and expect it to produce. They're getting it, but again, the management could change. So, and it's so critical that you've got your one person that really understands it and makes it happen. That's what we ought to be going for. And that person then, whether they go to another organization or they still understand and you can use that network. So I really like your approach of building this network regardless of which office is in currently under certain management. But eventually that stuff can happen. So I think it's been a really, really interesting talk.
Thank you, Chris. Any final ones? Okay, final. Thank you.
I think it's important to transfer projects to initiatives, because the Atlas, for example, has been working for 25 years, and we get our funding from Canada, from US, from Mexico, and God knows we had a lot of different governments passing by during these days. So the Atlas survived. So I think when you stop thinking about a project with a specific budget for 2 years, and then you're told to create a network and create collaboration, etc., but create an initiative that doesn't really have a deadline, then it's kind of easier and more susceptible to be successful.
Thank you so much. I think with that, let's end this conversation. You want to say something, please?
Just super fast, and I think kind of based on kind of the work that we do at the CEC, it's about communication, it's about collaboration, it's about kind of, trying not to duplicate efforts. We see it every single day. There's stuff happening on the ground that we don't know, and maybe we're duplicating that. So I think opening ourselves to collaborate with others and sharing the information, I think that's key.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, we all agree collaborations and not the duplication will not help. Okay, thank you so much for participating in a really lively discussion. Again, thank you for submitting really nice presentations to our session. And we are going to summarize all this and put on our Land Use Change website. Okay, thank you so much.